You're a failure.
And that's okay. Hi, I'm Dan.
And I'm Alicia. And we're failures too.
We take a walk back through people's failures and relive the mistakes they made so we all can have more clarity in how to be a better human.
Our guest today founded an employee engagement and well-being company. Yet, when she was assigned a particular project, the engagement expert found herself actively disengaged for a year and forgot how to take care of her own well-being. In this episode, we hear from Dr. Laura Hamill, Chief Science Officer at Limeade, an employee experience software company, and how she stuck with a season of uncomfortableness when it felt so darn bad. We learned that even the experts experience professional failure in their own arena and how movement and simple habits can help weather the toughest professional storms. Get ready for some Brené Brown today, longtime listeners. And welcome to the podcast, Dr. Laura Hamill.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for sharing your story with us today. So let's go ahead and get into it and share with us your juicy failure.
When you asked this question, I thought, oh my gosh, can I put a whole year as a failure? Is that okay? But then I was like, oh crap, it's not even over. You know how we have this funny thing about 2020 that it's just 2020 and then it's done. And it's like, oh yeah, no, it's still kind of happening now. So it's like, darn. So I think there's my failure specific, if I try to get as specific as I can about what my failure is, I would say it was being kind of assigned a task that was a hard one and that I wasn't really good at. And it was part of our company went public and in Australia, and I was asked to take on a big responsibility with the board. And I knew going into it, it wasn't my favorite thing. And I just dove in without really thinking about it. And it was pretty awful. I mean, honestly, I didn't do a great job. I was miserable for probably the whole year. And there's this whole context that I think is really important, right? Which is COVID, being a leader in an organization that cares deeply about employees and seeing them suffer and having so much happen with racial injustice. I mean, there was one thing after another in 2020. And so on top of this, I have this layer of doing this thing that I didn't feel like I was good at, I didn't want to do. And I really got myself into this really miserable spot, honestly.
Did you have a choice with doing this miserable thing? Was it something you kind of had to just do? Mm-hmm.
Somebody had to do it, and there wasn't anybody else to really do it. It needed to be done. And it was ongoing, and it was really high visibility. It was just kind of like this, all things kind of leading up to it not going well. And I guess the thing for me, I was thinking about that, was that the failure? And me not doing a great job, I don't think was the failure. I think the failure was what I did to myself. How I made myself think about that. So it's just in a lot of retrospect, it was instead of going, wow, I've never done this thing before. Somebody needs to do it. Yay me, I'm doing it. And let me learn, and it's going to be okay. Like stuff I tell everybody else to do. Mm-hmm. Instead, I was miserable, victim-y, blamey, basically all these really bad things, right? Where I'm like, doesn't anybody see how awful my situation is? Can somebody solve my problem for me? Mm-hmm. And so I just got into this really negative spot. And I think the thing that I realized is I didn't have a growth mindset, right? I didn't really, things that I tell everybody else to do, I wasn't doing them. I didn't realize, wait, just because I'm not perfect at this doesn't mean it can't be good, or I can't learn from it, or I can't make it better, right? I really had this very done to feeling. And so my failure, I think, was why did I torture myself so much? Like, why in that whole year I was just kind of miserable? I wish that I had, in retrospect, right, 2020, I wish that I had really been more compassionate to myself and more understanding and more of realizing the context, right, of what I was in and what I was doing, and not tortured myself so much, honestly.
Can we hear more? Sorry, Dan. I was just going to ask.
I was going to ask, what was the task?
Yes, can you tell us more about what that thing is?
It sounds awful, right? Like, what did you have to do?
Like, were you, like, murdering people? Like, of course I feel guilty about that. I'm not good at murdering people.
I was working on executive compensation. I had to do a bunch of work on executive compensation.
Okay.
It's really not that awful. But from my perspective, I'm an organizational psychologist, right? And so I have all of these things that I work on that I have a lot more passion about. Mm-hmm. And they tend not to be about things that are related to maybe more traditional things that you should do in HR.
Yes.
And so it's just not my thing, right? I'm not that good at it. It's not an area of expertise, and it's not something that I get excited about. And there was a lot of it to do because we have this new board and this whole new approach we needed to take.
Right.
So yeah, it sounds so tragic. Like I had to do something miserable, but for me, it sort of was that version of miserable. And I think because I've gotten older, I'm in my career more, I think I'm like, I want to do the things I want to do.
Yes.
And also, like, I'm good at those things. I'm maybe more of a perfectionist and didn't really want to admit that I wasn't that good at that stuff and that I, could have more of a growth mindset.
I can totally relate to this because hopefully no one at my company right now is listening to this, but recently I was asked to take on an HR business partner role in addition to my talent development role temporarily while someone is out on leave. And in my head, I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to do my job in addition to everything that an HR business partner does together? I'm like, This is setting me up for failure. I just flat out don't want to do it. And second of all, I've never really been interested in the HR BP role. God love them. I partner with these people every day and I thank them for what they do because I don't want to do it. I just don't. And so when they said this to me, I'm cringing thinking, please don't make me do this. Please don't make me do this. I will come up with a business proposal that says everything that I would do to support it, but not that specific
exactly.
thing. So I get it. And I think I've gotten myself out of it for the most part, but I totally understand. I was just kind of dragging my feet knowing I'm not going to be good at this. And it might mean that I'm going to fail. And I don't want to, show myself to this organization failing.
Completely. Exactly. And, again, more of like in retrospect, I also think because of all of the stuff I was talking about around what was happening in the world, I think my well-being was so low. Like I was feeling so bad for so many other reasons that I didn't have the ability to kind of see myself in this, right? I didn't have the ability to take a step back and say, wait a second, Laura, this is just a challenge. You had lots of other challenges, think about this as a growth opportunity, or think about, how you could be training somebody else on the team to do this. Like I didn't have any of that ability to be a little more meta about what I was going through. I think because I was just struggling so much with my own, well-being, and also like the well-being of other people too, just seeing everybody else struggling. It just felt like this, what show, it was just a lot of negative, bad, hard things. And because I didn't have that ability to look around, I just made it more miserable for myself, and kind of think about what are the things that fill your cup, right? And I feel like my cup was, I don't know how far you want to go with this analogy, but like my cup didn't have a bottom, or like there was no filling of my cup. I was just kind of empty. And so because of that, I couldn't make a better situation of this,
And you spent a year in this empty cup world?
Yes, I really did. What the hell, right?
And so it sounds like you have at least realized there is no bottom to your cup. So how did that change?
I think it's a lot of work and continuing to like practice more things that are related to well-being. Just honestly, like it's talking to a therapist, it's making time for myself, it's one of the things that I've changed that sounds so funny, but every evening my husband and I go on a walk together. We never did that before COVID. And that's been a way to like just get a different perspective and just do something different. I think just practicing this stuff and trying to acknowledge and acknowledge what was going on, the situation, and how hard it was. Which I think when you're in it, it's so hard to do, right? When you're in it, you just can't even get that perspective. And now I'm like looking back going, oh my gosh, it's amazing I'm still here. It's amazing we're all still here and that we're smiling and laughing and, kind of seeing it for what it was. Yeah. And so I think that just trying to have some more self-compassion. So it's a whole bunch of different ways, but I think it's a practice of saying, gosh, you come back every day and you try really hard, and you have such good intent and sometimes it lands and sometimes it doesn't, but you're just a human being, you just are, and just keep trying to do the best that you can, right? And that it's natural to make mistakes. I think one of the things also that this was sort of an epiphany I had when I first got married. We've been married for 23 years. When I first got married, I had this crazy expectation. I don't know where the hell it comes from, but things are always going to be perfect, right? Like, yay, and we're never going to fight, and everything's going to be perfect, and it's going to be happily ever after, which is so weird because I come from divorced parents, my husband comes from divorced parents. Like, why would I think that, right? But I'm different, right? For me, we're never going to fight. It's all going to be beautiful. And so I remember having that aha of oh shit, that's not true. That's not how it's going to go down, right? It's work. And sometimes things are really good and sometimes things are really hard. And it's more about the work and the journey. That's what the marriage is, right? Not this perfectly wrapped up bow. And so I think I was just sort of reminded, that's the expectation we have of ourselves and the expectation we have of ourselves at work, right? We have to realize it's not, a lot of times, it's not easy. And a lot of times it's not going the way you want. But what do you do about that? And how do you go on that journey, right? It's more about that than having, thinking that it's always going to be perfect.
Do you have a method of zooming out? What is your tactical approach to zoom out when you are in the moment? So you were speaking earlier about how do you get, kind of meta about your situation, and looking back, hindsight, you can see it, but what do you do when you're in it to say, pause, Laura, let me come up here and see the whole situation?
Yeah. I think there's probably a series of things I do. One of the things, and I think it's so individualistic, right? People have to find that for themselves. But for me, it's being outside. And so when I go outside, I'm lucky enough to have we've got about 2.5 acres of mostly trees. And I'm when I go outside, there's something about the grandness of the sky and the sunshine and the trees that make me go, get out of yourself, slap myself a little bit of getting some perspective. So for me, it's being outside. It's also talking to other people. I have friends who are struggling with things that are way harder than me struggling with, I don't want to do executive comp, come on. It's get over yourself. So it's a lot about, I'd say, perspective. That for me helps, in the way people come at that perspective. I'm sure, it's individualistic.
Yeah. So you said that you started going on walks with your husband outside.
Yeah.
Do you remember kind of the decision process that went from not going on walks to saying, hey, let's go on a walk?
Yeah, I do. It was actually my therapist had the idea. That's something like I always just try to normalize too, is like having somebody to talk to is not something to be ashamed of. Like, it's amazing, right? To have somebody who just can help you think a little bit differently. And this woman that I talked to, I can't even believe how well she does that. And so she just helped me see that I was basically with COVID, like there was no start and end, right, of work. And I love my work and I dig in, except for some parts of it. But I generally love my work, and like I just dig in and I could just keep going and going and going. And I realized I needed a more firm stop. And I think the firm stop I was having before was a glass of wine. I'm like, maybe not the healthiest firm stop, right? Is just to have a big glass of wine. So what is something else I could do? Well, I know the dog needed to be walked. And usually we're like, yelling at one kid or the other, like, you come on, it's your turn to walk the dog. And so then I said to my husband, after having that conversation with my therapist about finding some other way to have a firm stop, I'm like, well, the dog needs to be walked, why don't you and I go do that together? And now it's like we are ritualistic about it. Like, it's okay, what time? We're leaving in 15 minutes, like we don't, very rarely do we skip a time. And it's not like, again, back to sort of the rainbows, everything not being rainbows. It's not like, oh, we're holding hands and skipping while we're walking the dog. It's like, sometimes we're fighting, sometimes we don't talk. But it's just the fact that we're spending time together, and, having an intention around that has been huge. And so it was just us trying to make just kind of more of a firm start, stop, line in the sand for work.
I do the same thing with my partner. She and I, we walk the dog. We try and get a walk in the morning, in the afternoon, and then in the evening, trying to get those in. And, when I first got a dog, I was like, oh, I have this responsibility. But now it's an opportunity to turn it into something that is healthy for me. It's like a prescription from the dog doctor. Go take a walk and get out of your own head.
Completely. I am 100% with you. My dog is laying right here. I'm surprised you can't hear him snoring. But it's a quality of life thing, having a dog. I feel like just amazing.
I completely agree. Richard, my little pup, he's not with me right now. He's with my parents because I was out of town, and so they were gracious enough to take him. And I will say it has affected my daily routine, because it's a way that, I enjoy my walks with him. It's like my thinking time. And so now that he's not here, and I'm like, I'll also go exercise, but I don't take those walks. And it really does make my day different. It's like I have so many more jumbled thoughts, instead of like at the end of the day just kind of having this like smooth, part the clouds, clarity kind of mentality. It's like still thinking about stuff.
Yes. I wish that I had earlier discovered that movement and exercise can be more about emotional well-being than physical, right? And to me, like, I've been changing my mindset. This is, I know, off topic, but changing my mindset about the gym, of like, instead of it being like I have to go and it's hardcore cardio, that somehow has been in my, ingrained in me. It's like, wait, no, I'm going to the gym because of my head, like how it makes me feel better in my head. And it's so much more fun, and I do way more because I've changed how I think about why I'm doing it, right? So same thing with walks.
This is not off topic. In fact, I'm going to divert just a second and say I am
Let's do it. Let's go.
So happy that you just said this. I am ecstatic because I can't remember if I told you this. I think I did, Laura, in one of our previous conversations, is especially during COVID, I've had a lot of time with myself to think about what is it that I really want to do with my life? Like, what is my purpose? And I've found this way, or I've been trying to find a way to connect these three pillars of my life that are really important. One is travel, because not just going out and having fun, but really experiencing different smells, places, cultures. It really helps you open your perspective to other ways of living your life or solving challenges. So travel. Movement is huge movement, just like you said, getting outside, exercising, stretching, connecting with your body. Totally about mindset. Forget the six-pack abs. It's all about what it does for your mind. And then the final one is helping people solve their challenges in the workplace, because you can't be your best self in any role that you play in your life if you aren't aligned with mind, body, and soul and all these.
Preach, sister. Preach.
So I'm like, I want to do these retreats where we incorporate all these things, and we go to a place, we do movement, and then we have, sessions on mindset and strategy and goals with soul and all the workplace challenges that we experience day to day. So I'm glad that you said that, because it just validated me selfishly, not to turn the conversation on me.
Well, but it is truly what well-being is about. All those things you just described. Unfortunately, there's this crazy thing we think about when we hear the word well-being. We think water bottles, yoga, and six-pack.
Woo-woo.
Yeah, woo-woo, six-pack abs too, right? But if you think about it, about, feeling good in your body and in your head, and feeling a sense of purpose. Why do I wake up every day? This overall quality of life feeling, all of those things you just described are part of that, right? It's the purpose piece of this, the perspective, that feeling of I love my life, right? And that's, that to me is such an important thing for us all to discover, is wait, that matters. And I can do something about that, right? There's something I can do about that. And that's why I've also been so fascinated around positive psychology. So, positive psychology has so many, to me, just interesting and important nuggets in it around our mindsets, right? And how we think about our mindsets. And unfortunately, just like a lot of things, especially in the United States, we oversimplify and we think it's one thing, right? It's this, it's being resilient, or, it's being positive, and it's not. It's thinking about all the tools that you can have to use to kind of change how you think about things, right? And there's just so much good research and good tools in the positive psychology realm and in mindsets.
Is there something in particular that you've been thinking about lately, or is kind of a little pearl of knowledge or gem that you're looking at?
Well, we just did a research study, so
You're definitely into it.
Yeah, definitely into it. So what I've been really interested in is, it feels like, again, to my point, is that there are sort of trends, right, of mindfulness. Everybody talks about mindfulness and they go crazy on mindfulness, or it's resilience, and everybody talks about resilience. And so what we were really interested in, and Limeade Institute, which is one of the teams I head up, is, well, wait, if you had a whole bunch of different things like resilience, like gratitude, like openness, like optimism, like self-efficacy. There's, I think, 9 of them that we actually had data on. How do they work together? How might they come together? And maybe if you looked at them all together in a statistical model, you might find, it actually is just optimism, or it is just, one might dominate. And what we found actually was they all matter, and some rise to the top and matter more depending on what you're solving for. So if you're focusing more on really increasing your well-being, there's some that you might focus on a little bit more versus being engaged at work. There's some others that you might focus on. So what I got excited about was not so much one of them. It's just this idea of oh my gosh, I have so many tools that I can use to have an amazing life. And I need to get good at those. I need to understand what those are. Right?
Ooh, okay. Hypothetical question here. Ready?
Yes.
You ready? Let's say we can go back in time and speak to Laura of a year ago.
Oh.
With the research and the knowledge that you've collected and the insight from this particular failure, what kind of hot tips would you be sharing with past you?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. I would have said probably, all right, get ready. I don't think I was ready, right? Okay, this is about to happen. There's a lot of really hard stuff you're going to go through, right? And it's you can't even predict or imagine what that is. And how about you go into this with open eyes, but also just an embracing positive attitude. Knowing that you're going to learn a lot and it's going to be really hard, but you're going to make it through to the other side. And hopefully you'll have learned some stuff. I think I would have just had more intention and more of just the ability to acknowledge that it was really hard, and probably just more empathy and compassion for myself, something that I think I probably would have done for other people. That's much more natural for me to do for other people that I would have and should have done for myself.
Oh, I love that. And you almost kind of a subtext in that messaging you just gave was, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
That you are going to survive this. You're going to thrive from it. And it's going to be a challenge, but it's a good challenge and you'll be fine.
Yeah. You'll be fine, right?
You'll be fine. Take care. Take care, Laura. See you in the future.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious about this research because, as you know, I also am an organizational psychologist, master's, And so is this research, have y'all made it pretty and accessible to people to be able to look at and start using in their organizations?
Yeah, we're just rolling it out. So we're starting to do webinars on this and actually creating some assets, because we usually have webinars and papers that come with it. So yeah, that's all starting to happen right now. And so we'll make sure you have access to it. But yeah, there's some really cool stuff that we found that I think it sort of helps people think a little differently, about I think the thing that I get excited about is we have choices every single day about what we think about and how we think. And this just sort of opens our eyes to all these different ways we can be thinking that can improve our lives, like today. We don't have to learn, we don't have to learn how to do yoga, or, though yoga's cool. I'm not saying yoga's not cool. But, there's choices I can make right now about how I think about what's right in front of me. And one of my favorite ones, I have a tendency not to be very practical and specific. So let me give you a real practical and specific one. So I really believe in this idea, and research supports it, of get to versus have to. So when I think about my day, I go into it saying, I get to have this discussion. I get to be on this podcast today versus, I have to do that, And I swear something as simple as that, of just like framing, I get this opportunity. Who gets to do this kind of stuff, right? I get to. Yeah. It completely changes the way it goes down. And so get to versus have to is a simple one.
I love that reframing. Okay, so that cuts deep. That was my first introduction to growth mindset. Back in college, I was an orientation leader. Surprise, surprise. And I remember it was our crisis training workshop with the head of student activities. And she said, first things first, if there's blood, fire, or vomit, then it's a crisis. Otherwise, it's just an opportunity. And that became the rallying cry. So there's no challenges, there aren't problems, there are opportunities. And so when orientation actually hit, everyone's on the walkie-talkie, be like, I got an opportunity over here in the North Quad, I got an opportunity down here in the South Quad. And ever since, that's been my language, is that I don't have challenges, they're just opportunities.
Yes. And then that changes everything, right? Like, it doesn't feel like you're being done to with this awful thing that's happening. It's like, hey, there's something happening. How could I help? What could I do, right?
Yeah. You're the VIP in your own life.
Yeah, exactly.
In our first episode for this season, we talk about shoulds and shoulders, and how when you say you should do this or I should have done this, that is just automatically putting you in this box of feeling guilty about something or that you did something wrong. And so I tried to eliminate the shoulds from my vocabulary and really reframe it to whatever it is. Like, next time I will take this opportunity, or I will do it like this, or, not shoulding someone, but instead asking them a question like, I think you should do this. No one wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. So inviting, those questions instead of shoulding people.
Yeah.
Same thing. It's
Should.
like the have to and the can do.
Completely. Shoulds are hard, right? Because there's so much when we're growing up of like sort of, I should get good grades. I should go to college. I should have a great job. It's sort of like, it's the way we socialize people, right? All these things that people should do. And some of them are really great for us. I should exercise. I should eat better. But I'm with you on a lot of us have become just shoulds, like all victims of shouldhood. It's like, but I don't even shouldhood.
Yeah,
I don't even know like what I want, right? It's sort of that classic id, ego, super ego stuff, right? You don't even know what you want anymore because we've been so shoulded.
Right. And if you feel like society is prescribing something that you should be doing or taking a certain path, then how is that even sustainable?
Right. Mm-hmm. Completely. It's hard.
So another thing that I'm fascinated to ask you a question about, you wrote a children's book? Is that right?
Yes. So I did it with somebody on our marketing team. Her name is Jolene Kramer. It was her idea. So she was watching one of my talks. So it was actually Engage, not last year, but the year before that, when I was doing a presentation on the science of care. And so this is another great, like really, to me, interesting research study or set of studies really around this idea of it's organizational support theory. And it's really not that complicated. It's just this idea that when organizations support their employees, better things happen. And
who'd have thunk?
Shocker. But we dug into it and found some really cool, interesting parts of that. But she was listening to it and she's like, this is like so simple. But I think there's an analogy with little kids, like that we could kind of play off of. And she had an idea to write a children's book. And so she approached me about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, Jolene, that's amazing. I'd love to be, that just was very honored that she wanted me to be a part of it. So yeah, so she did most of the heavy lifting, but we wove in some of these concepts of, when you actually authentically care about the people around you, it's just better for everybody. Right? It's just better for everybody when you do that. And so in the book, which I think is really cool, is drawing the analogy of like, that's what my teacher told me to do. And then I'm like, hey mom, I'm noticing you're not really doing that. Like, why are you upset about work? And why are you yelling at your coworker? And then the mom goes, oh my gosh, right. And
it's real managing up right there.
Exactly. Exactly.
What an important lesson for kids to learn now, especially in the environment that's going on around us. I think there's more light shed on, like you were saying earlier, racial injustice and this, disparate groups and mindsets that we have amongst us, to teach kids earlier that the more that we can, pay it forward and show others that we care, the more that we can be a society and a community that builds one another up.
Completely. And yes.
Why haven't we done this already?
And that work is not this separate, different thing from that, right? Like, work can be so much better. And it doesn't have to be a place where you dread going every day. And it doesn't have to be a place where all humanity is left at the door. It actually could be a place where you feel more fulfilled. You feel like people care about you. Your cup fills up, right? It doesn't have to be a place that takes everything, your whole like soul from you. And I know that sounds super idealistic, but there are lots of companies that have figured this out, and there of course are lots that are very far from it still. So something's going on there, right? Some companies have figured it out.
So this might be a little inside baseball here, but I'm going to name drop some Adam Grant here, and specifically his talk about segmenters and integrators, and the people who segment their work life and their home life versus the integrators who blend it. And I'm curious what your perspective is on that, considering, I mean, it sounds like you're a blended kind of person.
Oh, gosh, for sure. I mean, I'm thinking all the time, I guess you could say, about work. It's funny because I think about it, I sort of identify really strongly with being an organizational psychologist. So I think that that's such a part of who I am, that I'm thinking about stuff related to that all the time, right? So it's funny because I don't think about it as work. I guess you could I think about it more of, I mean, calling sounds a little, corny, but like probably more like that, right? It's like just, it's who I am and it's what I'm thinking about. So I'm always thinking about that. But I think I think I've also done over time is like I also can talk about my dog, and I've got 2 kids, and my poor daughter, my son's in college, and so he's not here right now, but my daughter is, and she can probably hear every word I'm saying right now and rolling her eyes. I'm confident. But if she needs something, it's okay, right? Like I think it's much more my tendency to be more of the integrator, for sure. And I think trying to make those 2 worlds, live together peacefully, harmoniously.
So what do you think is the responsibility of the organization? I think you know this. I'm curious to hear what you say. And then what do you think is the responsibility of the employee or the individual to being more of an integrator, having an integrated work-life style?
There's so much that has to happen in order for both perspectives to work, right? And to me, there's a ton about trust that has to be in place in order for somebody to feel like they can really be a great integrator, and in order for an organization to do it in a authentic way. Like, we can't say, oh yeah, in fact, that's funny. I was doing a research project talking about the role of trust, right? Like, we can't just say, hey, employee, it's fine, go integrate, be yourself at work and bring up stuff, and I might also kind of expect that you're thinking about some work stuff on the weekend, or like, that just doesn't happen by somebody declaring it. It has to be built on trust in order for people to do that and feel comfortable for it to go both ways, I guess. It's just so important. And I was in a consulting practice. I'll try to do the super short version. I had a consulting business for about 10 years. And I was working with a client who had decided, and this was right when work-life balance, I'm old, so this is when work-life balance had just started. And so they had done a big survey and had asked their employees, and their employees like, yeah, I want to be able to have some flexibility at work. I want to be able to work from home a couple days a week. And they said, great, like, let's go. And they implemented a program and like rolled it out and made, had the process and permissions and everything all set up. And they were so bummed when 3 months later, like, nobody was doing it, even though that was one of the biggest topics on their employee engagement survey, is that employees were worried about that. Well, you probably know where this is going. It ended up that the CEO every evening was walking the office to see who was still there at 5:00. Ooh. And everybody knew that, right? Everybody knew it. So they knew that it wasn't real. It wasn't authentic. This is just surface level benefit that you are doing to check the box. You don't really want me to do this because you're sending this different message. So there was no trust there, right? So the point obviously is that in order for that to really happen, there has to be a different kind of psychological contract between the employer and the employee, right? It can't just be it can't just be I come to work every day and I get a paycheck and we're very transactional. It has to be more of a transformational type of relationship in order for anything like that to happen. So it's always a bummer to me when I see things kind of addressed at the surface level, like through a program or a policy change, and it's not real.
Yeah. Very unauthentic and not actionable. Yeah, I get that. There's a lot of that happening these days. Like, the hot topic that people say, oh, we got to have that, so let's just roll it out and check a box, but they're not really living it. And it's wasting people's time and energy and money and their mental well-being.
Oh, completely.
And just keeping us even further away from that trust that we're trying to build. keeps it's like something that breaks it.
And I get it because and there's so much pressure to do a lot of things, right? To have all of those benefits or the ways, you say our organization cares about this or cares about that. I understand like there's a lot of pressure to say that. But I do agree that it can cause more harm than good for sure if it's not played out. And there's so many so many things organizations are trying to do that almost by the sheer quantity of things, it's not going to work, right?
Yeah, they're just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
And in doing so, they're overwhelming the wall and the employees in turn.
Overwhelming the wall. I love that completely.
Well, Laura, this has been so fun. Do you have any final words of wisdom for our podcast listeners?
Wisdom? I don't know if I have wisdom. I guess it's just, it's a journey, right? I think if we all are just realizing that we're human and that we make mistakes, and it's what you do next, It's how you think about it, how you are to yourself. That's what really matters,
And to go on walks.
That's a really good thing. With your dog or your husband or somebody or by
both.
yourself.
Just put the leash on both of them and let them walk together.
Right. Or you can listen to this podcast if you're by yourself.
And we'll walk with you
at that
every step of the way.
Yes, we'll walk
There
with
you go. There you go.
Thanks to No BS Brass Band for the bangin' show music. Check them out at nobsbrass.com. And if you want to join any of our live shows, follow us on Facebook at the 2020 Perspective. That's 20/20 Perspective. As always, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player so you can get the latest failures delivered right to your ears. And may your failures be spectacular.